Alright, this video is in response to some questions I've had from some people and some issues that we run into every once in a while on these Paratrooper bikes, which is when a chain skips off the front sprocket. And a lot of times they actually, it's a little bit of a screw up, but they come shipped from the factory that way. It has to do with the fact that when they pack these bikes and then have to rotate the pedal a little bit, it just happens. They'll skip off and it kind of gets jammed up in there. It's normal that it's going to happen. It's normal you get a few little marks in the way this is made. But I'm gonna get this one derailed, which usually happens like this, and then it jams up in there. Okay, and then if somebody's tried to crank it a few times, it really gets jammed up in there. Well, the trick to unjam it is you got to get it to go backwards. Okay, so kind of tricky for me to hold the camera and do this, but that'll get jammed up in there, and basically you got to hold the chain with one hand, hold it clear so it doesn't just start rotating on that thing, and then just kind of tension it a little bit this way, okay, a little bit that way, tension it up against this thing, so as it clears through, it starts grabbing back up on here. Just to get to that first gear or just to get off of the thing. So we're going to tension it like this, and then we're going to start turning it backwards. Okay, and we're going to keep tensioning it and turning it backwards until we're clear of the obstruction. And if you have to work it back and forth, then do so. And this kind of takes two hands to work that thing out of there. I've got to set the camera down to get at that with both hands. Okay, now if all else fails and this thing really gets down into that track and just turning backwards doesn't do it, like this one really popped down in there. One way to relieve tension on a whole chain assembly is to remove the rear wheel. The rear wheel is a quick detach, so you kind of just wrestle it out of here carefully. Kind of got to rotate it to wrestle it out of there. With all the chain off of this, then with the wheel off and all the tension off the chain, then we have a little bit more we can work with to get these little chain links out. The trick is, and it didn't quite work this way with some of the older models, it's just the new sprocket system can do this. It's a two-hand job, but the trick is to get the links out of there, get them to this little cavity here, get it off, and then that's how it gets unjammed. Unfortunately, some of them, when somebody was packing them, that happens, and it's just part of the unpacking process. Every once in a while to unjam this. This particular one, I was able to unjam it just by kind of working that thing with the rear wheel removed, so I had less tension to deal with. One of the other aspects of it, though, is you're wrestling with this thing having spring tension. So yeah, that's one of the issues with this type of a sprocket, is that we can run into that. If the chain skips off, it can take 10-15 minutes to wrestle that out without doing major damage. And then the other thing to look out for once you have gotten it apart is the width of these little chain rivets. If any of these rivets are a little bit wide, then it's going to be a lot more difficult to unjam that thing. The other thing to look out for is this sprocket here, where while the bike is folded up, it's possible to bounce some of these gears on the ground. You can clean them up with a little grinder or file or something like that, or pliers, or straighten them back out. But if it starts skipping out here, it's not that big of an issue. If it skips off of this one and skips downward, stop pedaling, because then it can get ground into there. But if the bike has skipped a chain a few times and it's been unjammed a few times, you'll kind of get that to where it's kind of a little easier to get out after a while. And then inspect the chain for damage, which is unlikely. I mean, it's all pretty heavy-duty stuff. But yeah, the trick is to hold tension as you kind of work the pieces out, and then with the other hand work the crank and just wiggle and move until you get enough of the chain out. And then whether we're, you know, like if it's popped and we're pressing it here, sometimes you got to just kind of work out those little links one at a time. It depends on how they get jammed in there. Sometimes it just, I want to avoid any tools that'll bend these links, but these are pretty hard steel too. But, you know, if you got to relieve some tension on there and start working those out and working this thing, it's an unfortunate reality. It's one of the things that can really slow you down when you're unpacking the bike. And of course, if you're out riding, it can mean you're going to be here for about 10 or 15 minutes getting a chain unjammed. If it really happens to you a lot, then what you probably want to look at doing, it might be just time for a new sprocket. There are some sprockets I personally really like that are a single speed front, but Montague only puts that on the Boston 8. Any multi-speed bike, especially for heavier people, you can start running into some chain skipping issues. Don't change gears under heavy stress. You know, if you're doing heavy download stuff, just kind of downhill stuff, try to keep it in the middle gear. And that's something you're just going to run into a lot of bikes, and of course it gets to be a little more pronounced for heavier people like myself. The rig here, I mean, it's all good quality stuff. It just you know, it's a wear item too. And then if you get it shipped to you like that, you know, getting it unjammed 1 or 2 times is not going to be the end of a part or the end of a bike. It's a hassle to work those pieces back out. But once it's all out and running, you should be fine for quite a while. Most of the time, you should be able to get that thing unjammed and straightened out without removing the rear wheel. But if you have to remove the rear wheel, it's not the end of the world. It's got the same basic quick detach mechanism as a front. To reassemble the rear wheel, you make sure this stuff is all together, which is kind of, you know, it's unlikely that this ever came back apart just because of the way the chain threads through here. But remember, when you reassemble the gear, the wheel hub is going to sit here. Okay, so when we put the wheel in, we have to kind of peel this and get a little angle back, and it's a little tricky clearing all this stuff. No way I could do it with one hand while holding the camera with the other hand. But you can see the shapes of the grooves and everything you're going to work on here. There are some people that like to work on bikes right side up, you know, like on a bike holder, you know, one of those bike mechanic holders. On the Montagues and on the Paratroopers, a lot of this gets done upside down. Okay, that's just the way it's going to go. And then also remember that the way the folding frame works, you can do the work folded or together. Just obviously it's better to work on the bike with the mechanism just unfolded straight, because if it's folded, you can work on the stuff, because part of it is you can kind of still reach the front pretty easily, but the thing is having it folded and upside down can be a little bit awkward. So I just prefer to have it all in the straight position and then upside down. So in putting this back into its slot, we just make sure that we're lining our little things up here. Here it's not fully lined up yet. Making sure that, and remember, this whole thing flexes, and it's made to flex as part of the shifter mechanism. It's actually a very expensive part of the bike. So it's made to flex, it's made to move. The precision on this whole moving part is really a big part of the bike technology on any modern bicycle. So we're gonna try and settle this in. Kind of hard for me to do one-handed. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay, so it's all kind of settled in. We're gonna untension this thing. We're going to rotate the crank a few times so that kind of straightens itself out, gets itself into its gear. That's the normal riding position for all of this, for the tensioner and everything. And now the hub is just a quick, you know, rotating thing here. So we push that back into place. No tools, no wrenches. You know, might use a Leatherman tool for straightening some of that out. And then the way the shifter mechanism works on this is, you know, we've got the trigger shifting. So on the, yeah, what's normally the left-hand side, which is the right hand side here, we should be able to see the, oh wait, no, that's that one. Okay, the right hand side. I keep thinking about this thing being upside down. You know, we'll go through a couple of shifts here, and there you can see how the shifting is working. And then it's a push button shifter, so you can see there's actually quite a bit of movement in that. It's all based on the cable position, so you know, we keep an eye on that. Let's see here. Let's see, we got that, and then that should skip to the next gear. And there's some things with tuning this using these little levers here for fine tuning the shifters, because if you were skipping gears or rubbing, then you want to do some adjustments there. Otherwise you have to do it at the cable. And these bikes went over to a thicker cable not that long, a couple of years ago actually now. So they usually don't need to be retensioned at the cable much. Just a little adjustment up here. And this one you can actually do while you're riding. So that would be, really those adjustments will be the last stage after you've maybe unjammed a chain. And then the only other thing would be to confirm that this has settled into its groove in the right place. And if it hasn't, if anything's in the least bit unstraight with the way that turns, the cool thing about this is just a toolless adjustment of loosening it, making sure it's set into the groove, tighten it back up, and you're good to go. And then make sure there's no other side swing or wiggle or movement there that shouldn't be happening.